with Wyoming Liberty Group. Cassie is on the phone with us. Okay, here's what I'm hearing from both sides, Cassie. There are those people who would just love Wyoming to keep a balanced budget or get a balanced budget if we're that out of whack. And some of them will say to us that, well, if you really want to do that, you want to take this federal government money with Medicaid expansion, plus it will help our economy, and there's all these poor people out there who really need help, so let's expand Medicaid. The other side of the argument says if you want to bust our budget and not help these people, you'll expand Medicaid. Which side does Wyoming Liberty Group come down on?
That would be the latter, Glenn, and there's a few reasons for that. First of all, just look at every state that has expanded Medicaid and see what happened. They didn't make money at all. They've lost millions and millions and perhaps even $1 billion. So you're seeing other states have to enact taxes, like tobacco taxes, to pay for Medicaid expansion. And the reason it is, there is some federal money on the table, but there's a state portion that has to be paid as well. And right now that state portion is only 10%, but everybody knows that's going to grow. Most people think at some point it'll be a 50-50 split. So basically the state of Wyoming is going to be on the hook for a lot of money, and we don't even know what that's going to look like. And there was a lot of testimony in the Revenue Committee about this, and even the Department of Health policy person who's looked at the numbers and really looked into this whole deal said, we don't know how we're going to pay for this. You're going to have to cut other programs, perhaps mental health treatment and substance abuse programs to pay for this, and can we really do that? And we don't know how large it's going to be. Everything's based on estimates, which is another thing. You can't predict how many people will enroll in Medicaid, how many people will move here or travel across state lines to seek care. And so then what you start seeing is it's just like any socialized medicine. The healthcare wait becomes longer, and the people who need care urgently can't get it anymore. And then, Medicaid's designed to really help people who truly can't do anything for themselves. And does that end up being the case? Or are we now paying people, giving them a handout and not a hand up, and paying them to the point where it benefits them more to not get a job than it does to get a job? And so there's a lot of trickle-down effect, but there's a lot of unknowns, which is the worst part in a budget year. It's a known liability, but we just don't know how much it'll be.
That's something that you just said that I hadn't heard before. There's actually someone who testified, and remind everybody where this guy is from. He actually testified that in order to expand Medicaid, we would have to cut other departments like mental health and so on. Wait a minute, I haven't heard this before.
Yes. Yeah, that's the Department of Health saying that. It's a gentleman by the name of Franz, and he took a look at all the numbers and has taken a look at these other states and run some, even what he concedes are estimates, because we can't be certain what this thing's going to cost for the state of Wyoming. But the fact remains there's no money in the general fund, and he testified to that. There's no money in the general fund to cover this, so where's the money going to come from? We're going to have to make some cuts somewhere else to cover this. So are you getting some free federal money, quote-unquote free federal money, whatever that means, But are you also signing up for an unknown liability? And another thing that I think is a big deal is, this is really an Obamacare problem. The fact that people sometimes can't afford their health care premiums is because of how the ACA is structured. And what matters, I think, is that that's currently being litigated. Texas ruled that it's not constitutional the way that they're doing it. It's going up to the Supreme Court, and that whole system might become undone. And so I think that it wouldn't be very prudent of our legislators to enact a liability for us when this might be a moot point. I think we need to wait and see what happens before we start doing anything. And, you've talked to Dr. Mansell, who's a very smart guy, and he can tell you all the reasons specifically why Medicaid's not a good idea for physicians and for hospitals, and that there is better ways to do it. But, all that aside, we should really be waiting to see what shakes out federally before we try to fix a federal problem with state law and state liability.
Okay, you just, again, mentioned another part that hasn't been part of this conversation, so I'm glad you brought that up. And correct me if I'm wrong on this, but it seems to me when I take a look at surrounding states, even states across the country that have expanded Medicaid, there was an initial dump of money from the federal government, but in the long run, that money just starts falling short. Eventually, I don't see those states getting what they were promised. Am I seeing that right?
No, you're exactly right. And the reason for that is we don't know how many people will enroll. And so what ends up happening is it always, if you look at the states, the numbers always exceed what their estimates were. Always. So right now, Wyoming's saying that we would anticipate having to spend about $18 million and that hopefully the federal government would give us 154, but that's an estimate. And I'm looking at my notes from that day in Revenue Committee, and that Department of Health policy analyst I mentioned, he said, quote, there's a huge range of uncertainty. And, you know, when you hear this being discussed, they talk about it as a possible revenue generator, but mostly they focus on the humanitarian piece that, you know, they're all coming up for re-election, so this is a good way to help people. And the federal government, we're just leaving that money on the table and really trying to downplay the fact that we are, as Wyoming taxpayers, going to have to figure out how to fund our portion of this. And, oh, by the way, everybody knows that the federal government over time is going to try to get out of paying less and less and less and making the state pay more and more and more. So very concerning.
Okay, so and this is what I've been saying about helping people, because I understand, look, I want to help these people too. Just this isn't the way to do it. Because I think what we're seeing is the federal government is waving money under our noses, and people want to grab that money and ignore the consequences of taking that money. So a lot of what you just said, because I wasn't at the committee meeting, I haven't heard before, and that's also because a lot of Wyoming media isn't reporting this. Where can we find what you just said?
Well, you know, we're generating a lot of writing out of the Liberty Group right now about it. You'll find probably up on the website either today or tomorrow a written piece by Evan Blauser, who's the healthcare researcher here at the Wyoming Liberty Group, and he's basically doing a rebuttal to all the arguments toward Medicaid and giving you some real facts about what those numbers look like. So if you go to wyliberty.org, wyliberty.org, today or tomorrow, that'll be up on the website. Okay,
and I'll make sure to repost it on the Wake Up Wyoming website. Great information as always, Cassie. When I swing down in town, which I will, I'm in and out of Cheyenne all the time, so I'll go ahead and see if you're available next time so we can at least sit in a coffee shop and just shoot the bull for a while.
Well, yeah, we need to go hunt a minotaur, it sounds like.
It sounds like it. You know, I'll let you take the lead on that. I have your back. Don't worry.